Hi class, welcome back. Today we're going to go over Module 7, and this we title Composting Systems. Essentially what we're going to talk about are the different ways or units that you can use to create your composting environment. You'll see what I'm talking about as we go through this. Now whichever system you use, it's always best to have duplicates or have 2 to 3 of them. The reason you want multiple units is so that once you've filled one unit and started the composting process, then as you generate more organic waste and collect more organic waste, you can start a second unit. And it's even better if you have 3, because the amount of time it takes for the unit number 1 to get to finished compost, usable compost, you'll want to have unit 2 and unit 3 working along. So you empty out unit 1, start filling up again, and you can rotate through that. So you've got a constant supply of finished compost. So 1 unit is good, 2 units is better, 3 units is best. Now, I'm going to go over the different types or systems of creating compost. Now, the LSU Ag Center has publications on each one of these, and these are in your additional resources that you can see. Goes through more detail about building them and using them. So we want to touch on those now so you can get an idea of what's available and how to do it. Now, the simplest composting unit is a compost pile or a compost mound. Now, all your yard waste, all of your kitchen waste, all of your organic material that you want to compost can compost perfectly well just in a pile in your yard, as long as you don't mind having that pile for your neighbors to see, or you can kind of hide it in a corner. But all you got to do is pile it up like we see here. Just pile this materials together. Go out there, turn it on a regular basis, and your compost will go to completion. Now, with all of these, you want to have a minimum of a pile or a unit that is essentially 3 feet by 3 feet by 3 feet. That size we call the minimum because it takes about at least that much material in volume to get all 4 phases of a good hot compost pile to work, because you want to have enough so that you can actually get that thermophilic phase to develop and to stay for at least 3 days. So minimum size will be about 3 feet by 3 feet by 3 feet. And the only thing that a compost pile costs you is your time and your energy that you go out there to turn it. And it's real simple. Pair of gloves and a shovel or a pitchfork. Now, I got to point out, in all of these publications, they talk about using a shovel or a pitchfork to turn your compost pile. Chris was very adamant about making sure I tell you guys this. Shovel or pitchfork, scratch out shovel. You want a pitchfork, because a compost pile is made of bulky material. And if anyone's ever tried to put a shovel into a pile of bulky material, you realize it just doesn't go in there very well. You spend more work trying to get the shovel into the pile so you can turn it than you actually do turning the pile. But a nice 4 to 5 time pitchfork is perfect. You don't want a really huge pitchfork because then as you start to use it, each fork load is going to be way too heavy, too much work. So what you really want to use is a pitchfork. It goes into the pile easily, you can turn it, and it actually, using a pitchfork, gives you some idea of the maturity of your compost pile as you're going through and turning it. Because as the material breaks down, it gets smaller and smaller and less bulky and less bulky. So when you stick your pitchfork into the pile and start to turn it, and you lift the pitchfork up and all the material falls through, then you're getting pretty mature compost. It's probably about ready for you to put in your garden. Once it's in that state, you probably can use a shovel. A good idea also is to use a tarp to cover the pile, because it improves the composting in that pile, because it helps to hold in moisture and temperature. And also, it kind of keeps out a lot of the annoying pests that might get into it. And you can have a nice, colorful tarp to put over it, and it makes it more attractive. But the compost mound or compost pile is the simplest, the easiest, and it will do the job. Now, another system would be a garbage can composter. And you can use any garbage can. Once again, you want it to be, pretty pretty good size so that you get that depth and get the heat generated. Now in this one, you may not want it, it may be hard to find a garbage can that has a 3-foot diameter interior, but because you have the composting material contained, you can actually generate more heat in a smaller space in a garbage can than you would in a compost pile, because the can material itself is kind of acting like an insulator and helping to maintain that thermophilic environment inside the can. But you want a can that has some good size to it. You want to drill holes in the can, 1/2-inch holes, about, several rows of 1/2-inch holes, 4 to 6 inches apart. You want to drill holes in the sides and in the bottom, but you do not want to drill holes in the lid. Now, the reason you want holes in your garbage can for composting is for aeration. Remember, we already talked about aeration, how important that is, and you don't want to create an anaerobic environment. So the holes in the can help to keep it aerated. The holes in the bottom of the can, as you can see here, we recommend that you elevate the can, but the holes in the bottom of the can allows excess moisture to drain away so that you don't get a real soupy, soggy mess at the bottom of your can and the top being the proper amount of moisture. So having those holes in the bottom and having it elevated keeps the holes from getting plugged, so you do get good drainage and you'll have a nice moisture level in your can. The reason you don't want holes in the top of the lid, is because you don't want rain coming in. You want to be able to control the moisture yourself. And so you don't want holes in the lid of your garbage can because you don't want rain coming in every time it rains. And also evaporation and loss of moisture usually goes up. Well, no, as the water evaporates, it rises, and you want to help to keep the moisture in that you put into the pile, so don't drill any holes in the lid. Now, the nice thing about using a round garbage can, like I say here, any shaped garbage can will work. But if you have a round garbage can, you can use bungee cords. These locking handles won't really hold it completely, so it's a good idea if you're going to do this little trick that you use bungee cords and strap them across the top of the can to hold the lid on. And then just lay the can on its side, kick it around the yard a little bit, roll it, roll it, roll it, and now you've done your turning. That's the easiest way to turn your pile, is just turn your can over and roll it. And once again, you don't need a whole lot of materials. And as I mentioned on the other one, like Chris says, X out shovel, use a pitchfork. But now if you're rolling your can, the pitchfork isn't quite as important because the pitchfork is used for turning. And if you're going to roll your can, you might not even need that pitchfork. You can load it up using your hands, as long as you got the gloves. So this is another method. The garbage can composter is another system. Now, a third system is the wire mesh bin composter. Now this one is also a pretty simple composting unit, and all you need is, in this you can see, once again we want 3 feet by 3 feet. You want that size so that you can develop the proper thermophilic conditions in the interior of the pile. So that's the minimum size you want. And if you're going to create a compost bin that size, then you're going to need about 10.5 feet of 36-inch wide mesh. It can either be galvanized chicken wire or 1/2-inch mesh hardware cloth. Of course, I have to throw in a little geeky stuff every now and then. The 10.5 feet comes from the fact that if you want it 3-foot diameter, 2 pi r will tell you the circumference, and so that tells you how long you're going to need of piece of wire to create your bin of the proper size. And you'll need some heavy wire to tie the ends together as you bring it around. And if you're going to use soft wire, such as the chicken wire, you're going to need some metal posts or wooden posts, about 3 to 4 of them, that are at least 4 feet tall. As you mentioned here, you can use non-galvanized wire. However, if you use non-galvanized wire, it's going to break down really fast, it's going to rust, and you're looking at probably 2 to 5 years, your compost bin is not going to be functional anymore. It's going to be falling apart on you, especially if you're using thin wire like chicken wire. Now, I like to use heavy wire when I'm making these. If you use heavy wire, which is pretty durable, then you aren't going to need your metal posts or wooden posts. What you use those for is if you're making one with chicken wire. Now, this one's made out of wire mesh, so this one's pretty sturdy. But if this were made out of chicken wire, to help it hold its shape, you would drive a post maybe here, another one here, another one here, and another one here to hold that shape. But if you're using sturdy wire, you really don't need that. These are some tools you'll need, but the really nice thing I like about using, now you can put a bottom in these if you want, but I like them without bottoms. And I want to tell you why. Now you want to turn this pile. Now you could put a top on it and a bottom and have it all wired together and turn it over on its side if it's sturdy wire and roll it. But even if you're using chicken wire and have posts and stakes in there, a really easy way to turn a pile like this is just to grab a hold of the wire top, lift it off, and then just move it over a little bit. And now shovel all your pile up and put it back into your compost bin. Now you've turned it. You just pick it up, move it over, refill it. You've done a great job of turning your compost pile. So that's one of the advantages that I like about this one. And of course you get plenty of aeration because you have all those open spaces. So this is the wire mesh bin composter. And I threw this slide in there to show you, I call it variations on a theme. You can see all of these have wire mesh of some kind. This one is actually, this is a commercially available wire mesh composting bin. It's made out of 4 panels, so it's square shaped. And you can actually buy something like this. It's commercially available. Or you can, a combination of wood and wire coming together. And this one is one that's wood wire and actually turns into a nice tumbler. Another type of compost bin you can build is making it out of wood. Now, to build a compost bin out of wood, you have wooden pallets that you use. And you want to make this one, again, 3 feet by 3 feet by 3 feet as a minimum size. Or you can use lumber. Now, in our area, with the number of termites we have and the fact that, hey, you lay a piece of wood on the ground, you come back in 3 days, you might even have termites in that piece of wood. So pallets don't work really well in our area here. Now, in some of the other areas where termites aren't such a problem, using wooden pallets is a great idea. They're free. They're usually uniform in size. You can make a great composting bin using wooden pallets. In our area, we recommend using pressure-treated lumber, or as Chris likes to do, whenever someone rebuilds their fence and gets rid of those the fencing that's a lot of times is cypress material or something like that, you can build a compost bin out of those. But you want some kind of resistant wood material to use to make a really nice, long-lasting compost bin if you're going to make one out of wood. And so for our area, we do recommend using pressure-treated lumber or some type of lumber that is resistant to rot and termite damage. And of course, there's some tools you'll need to put it all together. Well, like I said, again, these publications are in your additional resources that talk about them, what you'll need and how to put them together and how to build your wooden box bin. Another material which is very long lasting, which is easy to work with, is cinder block. So you can make a cinder block bin. And it's very sturdy, very durable, easily accessible, because you can see as these, the idea in most cases is you're leaving the front of the compost bin open. So you can get in there, turn the bin very easily. Now these are all being shown without any covering over them. As we'll mention in a slide later, it's really a good idea to use some type of cover over any of your compost bins. So this one could be covered with a tarp, it could have a plexiglass over it, it could have sheet metal, something like that to cover your bin. And you can see now this one and this one are made with the cinder blocks stacked with the holes going up and down. So they're solid walls. That's perfectly functional as a compost bin. This one takes a different approach. They lay the cinder blocks on their side with the holes, creating a lot of good airspace and aeration for your compost pile as you're building it. So whichever way you want to do it, this one provides much more aeration. This one contains the materials better. But cinder blocks is another great way to build a compost bin. These are single units. This is a triple unit up here, as I talked about. One's good, two's better, three is best. Now this one, there's all the materials, all the instructions and everything you need for building. This one is a wooden wire 3-bin turning unit. As you can see, I put this up here intentionally. If you're watching this on the video, you think, oh my gosh, look at that, that's so tiny I can't read it. Well, that's because this bin, these types of bins, they're really nice, especially the one that we have the instructions on. This is it here. But they're much more expensive to build. They're much more complicated, and they require, a higher skill level. But they are very durable, and they can be made very attractive. So there's a publication on building one like this in the additional resource materials if you want. This just let you know how complicated and how much more involved it is to build these types of units. Now, rotating compost bins. These are the ones that you'll see commercially offered a lot, are the rotating bins. The whole purpose of rotating compost bins, their primary purpose is to make turning your compost pile easier. So whether you have one that's really complicated like this, and this one is pretty expensive. It's made out of metal, got this nice handle, make it easy to crank. Got one like this, which is a 2-unit system. It's actually a pretty small area, but it has the lids that close. This one's much larger, double units, and you can see the whole purpose of these, even this one that I showed you earlier, is to make turning the pile easier. So that's the big difference between what is called the rotating compost bins and all the other systems, is you're trying to make turning easier. This is pretty funky. It's just a huge sphere that you open the top, and that's where you put all the composting materials in. It's got holes in it. There's wheels here on each one, so it's like that vacuum cleaner ball. You can push on this side, it's going to rotate. You can push on this side, it's going to rotate. You can push on that side, it's going to rotate. It's easy to turn. If you have a Great Pyrenees or some huge dog, you can leave it in the yard and let the dog turn it for you on a regular basis as it plays with this huge ball. These are homeowner designs to show you, even if you're going to use garbage can, you can make it easy to rotate. They just have these suspended on an axis so they can flip them anytime they want. Same thing here if you're using old drums. This one shows how they created their own lid to fill it. I've got a crank handle on the side. It's easy to rotate. The whole idea of these is just to make turning easier. This is old wine barrels. I actually work for the company that we created these. It's sitting on a wheel here and a wheel here with the opening at the end. You pop it open, you fill it up. There are holes in it so that it does drain, and you just give it a push and it rotates pretty easily. So you can make about anything into a compost bin as long as it can contain the material. And The idea with these is just turning your pile easier, because turning is something you want to do. Now, why do you want to cover your compost units? Well, there's several different reasons. One, you want to protect it from the rain, because you don't want excess moisture getting into your compost pile. You don't want it to be overly wet. Now, in Louisiana, where we have some periods of time where there's rain for days and days and days, we get a lot of rain down here. Well, if your compost pile is open to the normal atmospheric conditions, you're going to have a lot of rain. Your compost pile is probably going to get too wet. And if it stays that way for several days, you're going to have anaerobic conditions. And another thing about rain and excess moisture running through your compost pile is you're going to leach away the nutrients. So as the microbes are breaking down those materials, they're creating nutrients that your plants love. And a lot of them will stay in the compost pile as long as they aren't leached out by water. So by covering your pile, you're protecting it from the rain and that excess water, so you can keep it from becoming too wet, and you also keep the nutrients from leaching out. Also, by covering your compost pile, you create an insulation to help hold in heat. So you want the heat to come up, as we mentioned. As Anna mentioned, of talking about temperature, you really want that thermophilic conditions to happen. And covering it helps to add insulation to help to hold that heat in. It also helps to keep in the moisture that you want in there if you cover it with a non-porous tarp, which is what you want to do. So it also helps to keep moisture in. Keeps excess moisture out, keeps the pile moisture in. Acts as an insulator. Covering your compost units helps to keep the pests out. And if something actually goes wrong, you maybe have a little too much green and you start to develop odors from anaerobic conditions when something's out of kilter, well, having it covered will keep those odors down. And then whenever you discover that you have a problem with your compost unit and your composting system, well, you can go in and fix it without making your neighbors mad because of that yucky smell coming from your backyard. So that's another reason you want to cover your compost unit. So as you can see, there's a lot of different units you can use, a lot of different systems. Choose the one that fits best into your own landscape and your own way of doing things, and have fun composting.